Now, when it comes to mobility decline, injuries can often be a big factor when it comes to mobility and activity decline. Now, posture is a thing which is connected to all of this and something that we should bring to our attention. Now, postural faults can cause injuries. Poor posture is probably the primary root cause of many joint dysfunctions, muscular imbalances, and the root cause of many injuries. Poor posture causes us so many problems that we fail to notice, especially when you're younger, because everything seems to be working so well. You don't have joint pain or stiffness or anything, so you don't give it any thought. Now, usually we remain completely unaware that we are even observing bad posture until someone points it out to us. Even when the problems start to manifest themselves, in terms of joint, injuries, niggling injuries, shoulder, knee injuries, etc., many still seem to fail to see postural faults as the underlying cause. That when that you have a tendency, you hurt your knee, you heal your knee, not realizing it's a postural fault that's caused this in the first place, and then it's just going to happen again and again and again unless you fix the underlying cause. Now, the reason that people don't realize this about posture is because everybody is doing this, most people, and it's considered to be completely normal in today's society. Next time you're out in a busy place, observe the way people hold themselves as they sit, stand, and walk, and you will see just how common this is. Now, the most common defects in posture are head jutting forward, forward rounded shoulders, and being hunched over. I will do some practical videos to demonstrate what I'm talking about. In this video, I'm just going to talk and explain it. Now, poor posture leads to stiffness and muscle imbalances, which ultimately lead to increased stress on joints and connective tissues in various ways. Research clearly demonstrates that when poor posture is observed over any considerable length of time, and many of us do this, it has been shown to lead to more instances of pain and joint dysfunction, and this can all affect your mobility, especially when you get older. Many people are unaware that poor posture is where most injuries originate. This is because there is usually an event that triggers the injury. You go bend down to pick something up and hurt your back, or you're carrying something, for example. But the root cause of this injury probably originated with poor posture in the vertebral column or somewhere else. It's the poor posture itself that places you at a much higher risk of triggering an injury, especially when you're placing the body under load. And this is, particularly when you are exercising, because you tend to perform various movements under load. Now, good posture will provide you with optimal alignment of all your joints and body parts. Bad posture will place many of your joints out of line. With your joints out of line, you will have an increased risk of injury, discomfort and pain, especially later in life. Bad posture effectively trains your body in a negative way through bad habits. Now, if you're young, there's no time at which it's too early to address this. Don't wait, as I myself did, until these problems begin to manifest themselves before doing anything about it. Optimal postural alignment consists of the body standing tall and straight and observing the three natural curves of the spine. In the cervical spine, thoracic spine, and the lumbar spine particularly, the vertebral column provides the body with central stability. This places all the extremities, shoulders, pelvis, hips, knees, etc., in proper alignment. But it's not just, your skeleton and bones, muscles and everything where you've got to think of your posture. There's also an interconnected system known as the fascia. Now, during my own journey, I conducted an in-depth study into the fascia and the way that it affects the body and the way it contributes towards maintaining good mobility capabilities as you get older. And it's vital to consider the fascia because Fascia is a connective tissue that effectively surrounds the entire body beneath the skin. It surrounds your muscles, bones, nerves and organs. It's comprised mainly of collagen and water. Now, the collagen provides strength and flexibility. The water provides the hydration and the lubrication needed. Your muscles glide easily during movement. When you've got a fascia problem, of course, your body doesn't glide as easily. Now, fascia can be categorized into different types based on its location and function. Superficial fascia is located directly beneath the skin. Now, this layer of fascia contains adipose tissue, which is fat, and is involved in thermoregulation, storage of energy, and providing support to the skin. Thermoregulation is the natural ability of the body to maintain core temperature independent of external environmental temperature. It's done via metabolic activity and, of course, by sweating when you're under load. You've got your deep fascia. This denser layer surrounds muscle, bones, nerves, helps to compartmentalize the muscles into groups that work together, muscle synergists. Deep fascia facilitates efficient movement by reducing friction between muscle groups and providing a pathway for nerves and blood vessels. You've also got your visceral fascia, which surrounds the internal organs, providing support and structure while allowing for their movement and function within the body cavity. Now, fascia performs various functions within the body. It's, like I said, support and structure, which is vital for posture. It provides a framework that supports organs and their structures, helping to maintain their positions in the body. In fact, this is the reason why when the organs remain in place when astronauts are exposed to a zero gravity environment, without the fascia, the organs would be subject to zero gravity and would have difficulty maintaining their rightful place. Now, fascia is also critical for movement. It allows for smooth and coordinated movement of muscles and joints by providing a slippery interface between different connective tissues. If your fascia becomes damaged, neglected, dehydrated or stiff, another good reason why you should stay well hydrated, this has a corresponding negative effect on your movement capabilities. Fascia also helps to protect the muscles and organs by absorbing shock and minimizing friction during movement. An obvious one here is when you jump. The plantar fascia, helps to support the muscles in the bottom of your feet when you're running and your feet are coming into contact with the floor. Now, it also helps with fluid and nutrient distribution. Fascia is involved in the transportation of fluids and nutrients within the body, including movement of lymph and blood. Fascia is 70% fluid. Now, I hope you can see that this is important not only to movement but also to the development of a well-balanced and functioning body. Healthy fascia promotes good posture. Good posture promotes healthy fascia. When you have good posture, you can move, stand and sit correctly. More on this in the upcoming videos that I've got coming soon. This all contributes towards helping to prevent tightness and localized persistent pain associated with impaired movement. Bad posture results in you moving, standing and sitting in ways that will stress, compress and distort your fascia. For example, if I slouch in my chair while I'm making a video, that is one area where a postural fault will develop over time. Now, when you have all of this, the stress, compress and distort in your fascia, it prevents it from gliding and moving freely. Not only does your posture affect and influence your movements, it can also have an impact on your mood. Research suggests that slouching and poor posture will have increased the likelihood of you having negative emotions or a poor mood. It's like, when you see people slumped over like this, walking down the street, they look dejected and, down on their luck kind of thing. Your posture even affects your breathing as well. When you're upright properly, in your chair like I am now, observing good posture, your ability and the room, in your thoracic cavity is vastly improved. You've got more room to breathe, as it were. If I'm slumped over like this, my lungs can't expand fully. Now, when you're hunched or slouched, you're effectively compressing your, hunch and slouch now. If you in your chair while you're watching this, you'll see what I mean. You're compressing your internal organs and your diaphragm and reducing the space available to be able to breathe freely. Now, connected in a way to posture, because the two often exacerbate each other, is your movement variation and movement form. Posture affects movement and movement affects posture, for good or bad. The form of your movement is determined by how effectively you are performing various movements and exercises. If you've ever trained, when you've had your gym induction or a PT session, they're always telling you form, 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 it's all correct. This is particularly relevant when you're performing movements under load, and with poor form, this is when you are far more likely to suffer an injury. And this is not only limited to exercise, this can also become far more likely when lifting, carrying, reaching, bending down, or things like this type of movement in your everyday life. Moving with good form is made possible with a combination of neuromuscular motor programming, proprioception, and muscular fatigue. Now, neuromuscular motor programming centers around the ability of your brain and nervous system to control the muscles during regular movement patterns. This is how we move. These motor programs are established over time by regular practice and execution of a particular movement. Now, a simple example of an established motor program that most of us have is walking. We learn to walk as a small child, and by means of continuous practice until it becomes a second nature to us. Once it becomes second nature, we've established a motor program. The continued practice forms new neuromuscular pathways. This concept is known as neuroplasticity, which basically forms the basis of all learning, both physical neuroplasticity and mental neuroplasticity. It's the downside to motor programming, because everything has a negative, is that the established neuromuscular connections can also be formed using poor form to develop postural faults and muscular imbalances. To correct all your faults is going to involve the establishment of new motor programs, forming updated neuromuscular pathways, and it's effectively overwriting the defective motor programming responsible for causing all of your bad habits. It's not something that can be done instantly or quickly, unfortunately. This can take months, even up to, a few years to fully do. It's important when learning and establishing new movement patterns to observe correct posture and good movement form from the beginning. For this very reason, because it's easier, it's very difficult to correct mistakes if you've been doing them for a long time. But often, for many reasons, this is neglected. The bad news is that correcting defective motor programming is harder than establishing new movements. This is because you've become subconsciously hardwired to perform these movements, and they are ingrained into your subconscious memory system and your nervous system. Now, poor motor programming will result in the various joints and muscles either being out of line or out of their proper place during these movements. Now, improving your neuromuscular pathways is going to involve targeted corrective exercises on the problem areas, and a long time of regular practice to stabilize all of the joints and educate them back into their rightful positions during movement. Proprioception is the ability to sense the position of your joints, of your body during movement. When you proprioception, if I reach over here and grab my phone, proprioception, if I have poor proprioception and I go to grab my phone and instead I've grabbed my glasses because I've got poor proprioception in the positioning and movement of my muscles. Now, many injuries happen partly due to faults in proprioception. Neglected muscles also that have been allowed to weaken fail to activate properly due to a lack of motor control. You compensate in your movements from either a lack of stability or a joint dysfunction, or muscles contracting or lengthening when they should be providing stability to a vulnerable joint. An example you often see in gyms, when people are doing a unilateral lat pull down, they kind of arch over like this as they're pulling them. This is because of weakened stabilizing muscles. When you're doing your unilateral lat pull down, you should just be moving like this, pulling your arm down, not craning over to the side as the weight and the resistance increase. The weight rises and the resistance increases. Now, a good method of training proprioception and indeed bodily balance, and balance is important as well, is with instability training. This can be done by attempting to maintain balance and motor control while standing or sitting on an unstable surface such as a Bosu ball or a Swiss ball. Training with kettlebells, dumbbells or resistance bands combined with unilateral movements are also very effective for providing bodily instability, as the loads are only placed on one side of the body at a time, and this forces you to engage the core and the postural muscles to remain balanced and upright. And of course, proprioception and neuromuscular motor control can both be negatively affected by muscle fatigue. The obvious element to this is tiredness due to exertion, but this also applies to muscular fatigue in postural stabilizing muscles that must remain active to support our posture. An example of this is the muscles of the upper back that keep your shoulders properly aligned. If you've got weak stabilizing muscles of the upper back, your shoulders tend to round forward. I'm over exaggerating that, but you see what I mean. This is usually lengthened and weakened upper back muscles cause the shoulders to anteriorly rotate. Now, this causes a problem, if your shoulders are not properly aligned during pressing movements or any reaching overhead or overhead pressing and things. Carrying loads, reaching out in front of you, reaching out overhead. They help to stabilize the position of the shoulders and prevent rotator cuff injuries and other shoulder problems. Now, I always make sure to train my stabilizing muscles from all angles, using high repetitions to ensure that they never let me down when performing upper body movements. Now, the trick to training these stabilizing muscles is not to train them with big weights. To hypertrophy, you should be doing, high reps. High reps with a lower weight is much more effective for these stabilizing muscles. These multiple angle exercises are also very effective for helping to keep my posture aligned and to provide adequate support to prevent any forward rounding of the shoulders or other postural faults, because weak upper back muscles often result in rounding of the shoulders, and when you're doing this under load, this is going to cause problem. But of course, the same is true for all of your postural stabilizing muscles. Considering these aspects of movement, you can get an idea of why, if you are just performing the same movements all the time and do not engage in a varied movement pattern, then muscular imbalances can occur. If all you do is lift dumbbells and barbells under load using the same movement patterns every week, or run long distances, or cycle all the time, or play a sport that uses the same movement patterns all the time, examples tennis, football, soccer, then it should come as no surprise that eventually you will experience joint pain and muscular imbalances because of you're doing the same movements all the time, using only certain muscle groups, and some of them being neglected. Now, all of these exercise strategies place a disproportionate stress on the same muscles or muscle groups all the time, while any muscles that are not targeted are being neglected. Usually this is, when I say neglected, this is the stabilizing muscles. The secret to fixing or preventing joint dysfunction is varied movement patterns, which are all trained and developed on a regular basis as part of your usual activity routine. By widening the scope of your activity, this reduces joint pain and indeed the likelihood of joint pain. But usually, especially in older people, there's a tendency when an injury occurs to reduce the scope of activity and movement patterns and to perform lighter and less stressful exercises that either avoid or work around any joint pain or painful area. There is an element of caution or fear of making the joint pain worse or the problem worse. Exercise patterns then become more limited. Easier exercise methods are employed with a tendency to move through shorter ranges of motion, and this all contributes to mobility decline. Now, this is a mistake. You only have to change your approach to training and train your body to be more resilient to injuries and stresses through varied movement patterns and the introduction of corrective exercises to shore up all the weaker and neglected muscles, is going to be very helpful. Muscular imbalances occur when muscles or groups of muscles are stronger or larger than others. A common example is well-developed pectorals combined with weak upper back muscles. And I don't mean your lats, because many guys train traps, they train lats, they train pecs, but the rhomboids, for example, are being neglected, and the lower trapezius, for example, and this can all contribute towards you having muscular imbalances. And then, like I said earlier, you're doing a unilateral lat pull down and you're craning over like this as you're pulling the cable down, which of course is not good because you're placing your vertebral column under undue stress, and it's just an injury waiting to happen. Now, of course, it's possible to have visual imbalances, such as one bicep bigger than the other, and that's actually more common than you think. But it's not usually the cause of joint pain or injuries. It's muscular imbalances that result in defective or altered joint mechanics that create problems and imbalances. In the above previously mentioned example, well-developed pectorals combined with weak upper back muscles often creates imbalances within the scapulothoracic region and results in anteriorly rotated shoulders. And you see this, quite often in fitness influencers online and bodybuilders sometimes, which of course is going to increase the risk of injuries to joints and connective tissues during many upper body movement. For example, the unilateral lat pull down when you're going over like this each time you pull the cable down. Negatively altered joint mechanics alter movement patterns and also have a negative effect on joint stability. This commonly results in joint pain and repetitive use injuries. In reality, poor posture, poor movement patterns and muscular imbalances are all interlinked and all affect each other negatively. Postural faults lead to altered joint mechanics. This affects mobility and the stability of joints. Then when you add load to the equation, this often leads to joint pain developing, and inflammation over time. And when pain occurs, there's often movement compensations to avoid placing too much stress on the affected joints. This then leads to the formation of new defective motor programming as these compensations are observed long term. This inevitably leads to more postural faults, and it's a vicious cycle and a catch-22 situation. However, with mobility training and increasing the scope of your movements and introducing corrective exercises into your regular routine, this can be improved and even reversed in many cases. For most people, getting this dialed in and taking care of your posture and your muscular imbalances will result in improvements. Maybe not a full 100% cure, but certainly improvements for 99.9% of people. Now, in fact, it's the most effective strategy. The usual methods of performing lighter loads and reducing range of motion will not work any more than attempting to stretch or foam roll your way out of trouble will. They've got their benefits, stretching and foam rolling, but many people do these to try and alleviate joint pain and muscle stiffness. Now, of course, connective tissues such as cartilage, ligaments, tendons and muscle fascia also contribute towards joint pain. And I will be showing you in upcoming videos, exercises and strategies that you can use to focus on this. Now, another thing which cannot be neglected when it comes to joint pain is aging, which of course is unavoidable and brings with it many movement problems, but also conditions such as rheumatism and arthritis. Many of these conditions are primarily caused by collagen degradation. Now, of course, if this happens to you, this can't be helped, but you can still improve your situation. Often in these cases, many adopt an anti-inflammatory approach to their lives, believing that inflammation is the primary element that's to blame. In some cases, no doubt it's a contributory factor due to poor diet choices, high refined carb diets, excessive sugar, alcohol consumption, all cause inflammation. But in many cases, inflammation is not the underlying blame. Yes, inflammation can contribute towards joint pain, but understanding how inflammation works can reduce the effects it will have long term if you do have arthritis or rheumatism or something. Other causes of joint pain are certain medical conditions, and of course in these cases we can still utilise varied movement patterns and correctives to our advantage. But sadly, I'm going to tell you the truth here, these strategies are unlikely to completely eliminate these conditions, and I'm talking about things like fibromyalgia, for example, which can lead to joint pain and inflammation and movement restrictions. Now, being overweight is another factor, and this is not limited only to obesity, but also accumulation of excessive amounts of muscle mass for the base structure, which is the skeleton of the individual. Enhanced bodybuilders, take note here. It's said that each additional kilogram of body weight adds around 4 kilograms of additional pressure onto your knees. Think about this. It only takes an extra 5 kilos of body weight to add an additional 22 kilos of pressure onto your knees. Maintaining an ideal body weight for your frame, the lean athletic physique, which also happens to be the optimum physique for aging, longevity, testosterone and a whole load of other things, is a vital aspect to preserving mobility and preventing joint pain as well. The introduction of more varied movement patterns, targeted correctives and load-bearing training are the only interventions that will address all of the primary root causes of joint pain: posture, movement form, muscular imbalances. And so in the next video, we'll look at how to perform a posture analysis and identify any postural faults that you have. Then we'll begin, in the next few practical videos, looking into ways that you can begin working on various postural faults in the feet, knees, hips, etc. And you can begin working on this and to be able to have the body part that you want, or the body that you want, or a body that's more efficient, and fix the body parts that are not working so well for you. Once you become aware of your postural faults, it's possible to correct them. To fix a problem, you must first admit to yourself that a problem exists. Just because this is now normal for the majority of people, and you'll see this if you observe people outside and the way they move, just because everybody's doing this, it doesn't make it a good thing. On no account can your posture be neglected if you want effective results, in terms of long-term mobility. This is the first thing you must focus your attention on and begin to repair. Making improvements to the primary root cause will help you as you engage in adding more varied movement patterns and correctives into your regime. Failure to do this means that all the other interventions you implement will be much less effective. Stay tuned for more.